Hi, I'm Femi Oke.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in The Stream.
Today, America's deadly battle with prescription painkillers and heroin. President Obama has proposed $1 billion to fight it, and we'll meet people on the front lines.
And as our community points out, those people come from all walks of life. Michigan on Twitter says the biggest misconception about addicts is that they're degenerates. Instead, she says they can be your high school star quarterback, his dad, or you. So to join today's conversation, tweet #AJStream.
Hey, I'm Malcolm Beath. I'm a freelance journalist, author of the book The Last Narco on the Mexican Drug War, and I'm in The Stream.
Every day, about 125 Americans die after overdosing on heroin or opioid pain medicine. That's a 200% surge in the past 15 years. So what's happening? Prescription painkillers like Oxycontin are awash across the country. They're fueling a craving for opioids, including heroin. And these new heroin users are mostly white and from the suburbs and small towns. So unlike previous drug epidemics that swept black neighborhoods, this one is being treated more like a public health crisis than a crime problem. So to help us understand addiction and recovery and what's going on in the US right now, Cyril Scovens is a long-time recovering addict turned counselor who lives in what's known as the heroin capital of America, that's Baltimore, Maryland. Dean LeMire is a recovering addict and prevention coordinator. He's in Somersworth, New Hampshire, which declared a state of emergency in 2014 due to drug overdoses. Jennifer Weiss-Burke leads Healing Addiction in our community, a care center in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which has struggled with high rates of heroin deaths since the 1990s. And Dr. Carl Sullivan is the Director of Addiction Programs at West Virginia University School of Medicine, and his state has the highest rate of overdose deaths in the country. So guess it's good to have you here. This is such an important topic. Let me see. Cyril, do you remember the first time you got high?
I'm a little different than most people. I was born addicted. My mother was an alcoholic, and my mother was an alcoholic, and so she didn't realize her water had broken, so she didn't go to the hospital, and I actually was in her stomach an extra 2 months.
Wow.
So I was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, in incubator for like 3 months. So I'm one of them, which years ago would have been unique, but not anymore. So I like to start off saying I took my first drink in my mother's womb at inception, and I took my first drink out of her womb when I was 2 years old.
See, I've got a picture of you here. You're looking very dapper. In fact, let me see, that pocket square, is it the same pocket square?
No, it's not.
What's going on here? I like your style. You started young. All right, so how old are you here, young man, in this picture?
7.
You're 7. Now, were you already an addict at 7? What are you taking at 7?
I was smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol, drinking beers.
Whoa. Right.
Pretty much
remarkable.
already.
Dean, when did you first get high?
I first got high, I started using marijuana a little bit when I was in middle school, so around age 12, 13. Took my first drink at age 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did it feel like? And this is the hardest thing. I want to know what it feels like, and it's hard to explain. Can you explain it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it felt like freedom. You know, suddenly I could relate with people better. I could feel okay being by myself. Yeah, there was a lot of emotional stuff that kind of got doused and relieved when I drank and used other substances.
You know, people online are also sharing their own stories about how they became addicted. This is Trisha, who says for her, it started with post-surgical painkillers. It wasn't the doctor's fault, she says, because I was practically hooked from the first use. But she goes on to say, I've actually had it said to me, but you don't look like an addict. Jennifer, when you hear that, what does that mean to you?
I think that's exactly what happens to a lot of people. You know, we have this huge stigma surrounding heroin addiction in particular, that a heroin addict has to look a certain way and has to be a certain class, and that's just not the case anymore. I mean, anybody could be a heroin addict in today's world. And I think for us to make any legitimate change with regards to this issue, people really have to stop stigmatizing what an addict looks like.
The reason I agree, because when we say the word addict, what we normally see is African American male or older gentleman with a needle in their arm, and they're scurrying around the streets and they're looking for drugs, and that's not addiction in America. That's the end of addiction. And what most people see as addiction is really what they're saying as the end of addiction. That's when the person has lost the ability to work, create anything. They're at the level where the drugs have fully taken control, and that's what you see. But addiction starts with a person who's still working, still, stop me if I'm wrong, doctor, still maintaining employment, going to school, still has all the trappings of looking like a person in success when they've just begun the process of using.
Yeah, I was thinking I would jump in because it's interesting. I have 35 patients scheduled this afternoon in the clinic that are all opioid addicted, and I have medical students who rotate with me, and they invariably will be in with these patients and are always stunned because their perception, or at least their assumption of what patients look like, is very different from what they actually look like. And the comment gets made to me all the time that, in fact, these patients look like everybody else. They don't look different. They really are everybody else. And what you've heard before, that there's this sort of stereotype about what an addict looked like, is just not correct. I mean, they come in every shape and size and every color and every job description. And so, you know, that's actually a big issue with what we have to deal with addiction, is that there's this mental stereotype that is just not true. And if I could add just one other thing, it's, you know, it's interesting because a lot of my physician brethren don't want to treat addicts because they're afraid that you know, they don't want those people in their waiting room. And I always say to them, well, it's too late. They're already in your waiting room. You're just not treating them, and you don't even know that they're there. And it is a big problem.
Yeah, Jennifer, you said yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, my son was addicted to heroin, and he passed away 4 years ago from an overdose. And he was 16 years old when he got started, and we had that same issue. Just, you know, he was a 16-year-old high school athlete that got addicted to painkillers that progressed to heroin pretty rapidly when he was unable to get his prescriptions refilled. And you know, he didn't look like a heroin addict. He didn't look anything like a heroin addict. You wouldn't know walking down the street that he was addicted to heroin.
Let me show you a picture. Yeah. This is Cameron and Mum, you, Jennifer, and Caitlin here. And this, we talked about opioids at the very beginning of this show. It's a really big deal because something very specifically happened with medicine in the 1990s and pain relief that actually has spawned this major heroin epidemic, Doctor. I mean, it's shocking that it would come from the medical profession, but it has. Can you explain?
I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, please do. Go ahead.
I did want to talk about that a minute because I watched this whole thing occur. I've been doing addiction medicine since the mid-1980s, and in the entire decade of the 1990s in West Virginia, I saw only 2 or 3 people who were using heroin. But in the 1990s, it became very unacceptable for patients to suffer with pain and to go untreated. And unfortunately, what that meant was that opioids, when used correctly, were unlikely to produce addiction, and that opioids were safe and often very effective, maybe the only effective thing for patients that had pain. And it became almost unacceptable to be a physician who neglected their patients if they weren't aggressively treating pain. And doctors were told that opioids were not likely to be addicting, which was completely, in my world, was completely crazy, but that's exactly what happened. And so doctors, sometimes with very little training, started aggressively treating, you know, what we would consider relatively minor pains, back pains and knee pains and headaches, etc., with opioids. And the world became awash in prescription opioids. Well, which has subsequently, and we may talk about this, fueled the you know, the heroin epidemic that has emerged since then.
Yeah, because oxys were, if you remember the commercials back in the 90s, they would show the commercials, you know, because, you know, we found this new drug, oxy, and it's non-addictive. And you can give it to your patients, and you can take it for back pains, and you can take it for this, and and I'm thinking to myself, because I'm a recovering addict, like, really? They got an opiate that you can take and not get addicted?
It was crazy.
Well, let's hear it now. Last year, the FDA just approved the Oxycontin for children. And so here we go
The
again.
Food and Drug Association in America. So basically, they say what's safe, what's not safe to use. And
Right.
so now there's a version for little kids.
Now there's a version for little kids.
Wow, Malika.
Well, this progression to heroin is a big issue online and among our community members. So, Dean, I want you to have a listen to a video comment we got from Jesse, who describes it and what happened to him.
I first started with Percocets, Vicodin, the usual story, and eventually moved on to stronger ones, heroin, that I was introduced to. It wasn't necessarily because I wanted to do heroin or shoot up with a needle. It was just the fact that it was cheaper and more available. Late at night, 2 a.m. you can get it, whatever. And yeah, then it progressed from there. Heroin. Then I was shooting up any of the pills that I was using previously that were injectable.
So, Dean, he started with the pain medicine Percocet and then transitioned. Can you talk about that ease and why it's cheaper and how easy it was for you to obtain?
Yeah, well, I never had an injury, and that's the story for a lot of my friends today. It starts with an injury. It's certainly not a choice, but it is a natural progression. Kind of once you hit some tread with your substance misuse, at some point, you kind of lose the ability to choose whether you're going to continue or not. At least that was the case for me. So I was taking a relative's oxycodones and Percocets for a couple of years, just because I thought it might feel good, and it did. And he was overprescribed so much that it took a couple of years for him to really notice and say something about it. And suddenly my supply was cut off. So,
Right.
and so I went back to drinking, and that wasn't enough for me. My disease was kind of progressing, and I moved on to heroin. And at that time, for me, it felt so obvious and natural. Now it feels, it sounds crazy, and it sounds crazy to the general public, and it's really not something I have the words to relate to you.
All right.
But I certainly relate with the video comment.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
The sad truth is both these stories are incredibly common. I saw 2 people this morning. One started on hydrocodone for pain and is now smoking heroin. The other one is a young pregnant woman who started out on, I forget which prescription opioid it was, for her back, and she's now shooting heroin. And you'll hear this with monotonous regularity,
See,
and
doctor,
it's really sad.
It's shocking. How do you go from a pain injury like Jennifer's Cameron had, and then you're shooting heroin? How does that progression happen?
It happens real easy. Okay, an opiate. Opiates are addictive by nature. In the hospital, you get opiates, and sometimes they have to detox you before they send you home. So the transition to addiction isn't this long length of stretch.
Right.
And with her son, I mean, I was working in Carroll County, and the story of your son, what I read yesterday, it was over and over and over again that I would hear these kids come in and say, I was a high school football player, and I got hurt. And we know football, they keep you playing, even if you're hurt, they give you some medicine, you eat the pain. And they said within 6 months, I was addicted. And I was going to Baltimore buying heroin, because that's what you get. Because what did you just say, Dean? Because you got to find a place to get the heroin at 3 o'clock in the morning. Right. And so, and in the counties and the rural communities, it's not there. You have to go to the urban centers.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what happened to my son, and it was about a 6-month progression before he started using heroin, and then it was a couple months after that before he started shooting it up. Mm-hmm. But it's your body and your mind become addicted to the feeling and to whatever that drug is doing for you mentally and physically. And they just can't stop. I mean, people say, why can't you just stop? Why can't you just stop? It's not that easy. And for a lot of people, my son included, it took he went to a lot of different rehabs. He went to a lot of different detox facilities, sober living. I mean, 2 years worth of treatment in different places. And, he just kept going right back to it. So it's we treat it as this moral failure when it really isn't that. It's a disease that has to be treated as such, and it's not easy for them just to quit using. It's much more complicated than that.
And Carl, Carl, I want to show you something, because a few people are pointing the finger in a specific direction. This is Dome on Twitter, who says Big Pharma, the big pharmacy companies, pharmaceutical companies, excuse me, have made abuse part of the business plan. They're treating meds like candy. That's something we heard on Facebook as well. This is Ellipsis, who says we need to stop doctors from prescribing like candy. Do you think this is an accurate place to place some of the blame?
Oh, absolutely, and I hate to call it candy, but you know, the truth of the matter is there was a time when doctors really believed that these things were safe, and some doctors handed them out so liberally, and you know, I'm convinced some of them even did it unethically and probably illegally, knowing full well what they were doing, and they just became, we even call them in the medicine profession, we call them candy men, because these are people who would write for any kind of prescription that you wanted. But there were a lot of other doctors who wanted to do the right thing. They just believed the pharmaceutical line that these medicines were safe when used correctly, and you know, they found their way, either the patients themselves ended up becoming addicted and having a problem, or they sat there in their medicine cabinet until somebody found them and took them from them, and then that person ended up with a problem. But you have to understand, opioids are very seductive. They just hook the brain quickly, and I want to make sure the audience understands this. You know, the only difference between heroin and all these prescription opioids is that heroin is illegal, but it's an opioid just like all the others are. And the difference between oxycodone and heroin is not that great. And even today, some of the patients would rather have oxycodone than heroin, except it's so expensive. So they go to heroin because of the availability and the fact that it's cheaper, and you know, it's fueled, and nowadays, you know, we've got these cartels, these Mexican cartels have brought in a lot of really pure heroin. I hear this every single day about how much better the heroin is than it used to be.
Oh my goodness. All right, guess.
You know, it's an issue.
Let me show you something that actually caused a little bit of controversy when we shared this. This is on my Facebook page, not my Facebook page, the Stream's Facebook page. Nearly 90% of the first-time heroin users in the US are white. Okay, people got really uncomfortable about that. I was like, that's racist. Why would you say that? But I am wondering whether this might actually be a really good thing. Are people changing how they think about drug addiction in the US because it's actually affecting people that you wouldn't normally think might have an issue? For instance, 70-year-olds who are hooked on painkillers actually going to look for. Tell me that story, Cyril.
Well, I mean, I'm in Baltimore. Where I work at is at the heart of Baltimore. And what we've been seeing, and even when I was working in the rural Westminster, Maryland, the kids are hooked. They're going down to Baltimore. The girls are prostituting at 16 years old. And I'm talking about senators' daughters, doctors' daughters, reverend's daughters, who would normally should be home in the suburbs, are now out at night prostituting.
Is America changing how it's looking at and treating addiction now?
So okay, I'm gonna answer this twofold, because I'm African American and I'm from what would be considered the ghetto.
Yeah.
Yes, in the 80s, and it was and maybe unwisely they thought they could arrest their way out of the addiction problem.
Right. When you look at it as a crime.
When you look at it as a crime.
Right.
They thought they could arrest their way out of it, and arrest is normally a deterrent factor. The problem is, Doc, tell them again, can you deter heroin addicts?
No.
Tell some heroin addicts that if you tell her, this is why it doesn't work. If 25 people just OD'd on 25th Street, known OD'd from, and they said that it was fentanyl in the heroin, you would have 500 people there trying to buy that heroin.
Right.
So fentanyl is a drug that doctors use at the end of life to ease pain when people are basically dying.
So where's it coming from? How's it getting on the street? How are they cutting the heroin with it now?
Malika.
That the same sentiment really is something we've seen a lot from. This is Cloud Johnson, who says, white people have a hidden drug problem called meth, heroin, painkiller addiction. It's worse than the crack epidemic, but goes on to say, yet in the 80s, former President Ronald Reagan's war on drugs painted blacks as crack-addicted zombies. So when we pose the question to our community about President Obama's new initiative to put money towards this, $1 billion to tackle heroin abuse, we got this tweet from someone who says it's necessary and it's needed, but where was this type of effort when it was the crack epidemic with poor black victims? So Cyril, it sounds like you're saying, well, I welcome the sympathy because at least this will change things for everyone.
Right. Well, because this is a true fact, okay? I never sugarcoat it.
You never sugarcoated?
No.
Explain.
When it was
Cyril,
when it was a strictly African American issue.
All right. Okay.
Right.
All right.
It was criminalized.
Right. Right.
Okay, and we understood that, but just because it's now affecting younger white urban families, and it's moving from criminalization to treatment, that's a good thing. It doesn't, to me, sometimes it doesn't matter how we get there. We just need to get there.
All right, let's get there. Dean, hi. Come back into this conversation. We're kind of talking about you and your friends, right? Have you noticed, now that you're counseling people, you're helping people, have you noticed that attitudes have changed towards addiction?
Absolutely. I mean, this was not called an epidemic when I entered treatment in 2012. Only since then has it become a national epidemic, and especially in New England.
Yeah.
And now people are starting to call it a public health crisis.
Sure.
And there's a rub, because our first responders or our police are at the front lines of this epidemic and this public health crisis.
Sure.
So there's a rub about how do we respond with a traditional police intervention approach, or do we actually treat this as a public health issue and put public health workers at the front lines? And importantly, who do we fund? Do we expand jails, or do we expand somewhere like Goodwin Community Health, a health center?
So doctor,
and expand outreach.
Yeah, so doctor, is this an epidemic that can be cured, stopped?
This is a very difficult epidemic, and part of the reason that President Obama came to West Virginia was to talk about this. It's important for the audience to understand that just detoxing this people and hoping that they're going to stay clean is a fantasy. It rarely happens. Most of the time you'll detox them, they'll leave, and they are going to relapse. These people have they are sick. They've got complicated, messy lives that need lots of attention. And I need to bring in the fact that medication-assisted treatment, we haven't talked about that yet, but there's no question that medication-assisted treatment has offered some hope for people that otherwise I used to think were hopeless, frankly. And, we need to get more medication-assisted treatment out into the public. We do not have near the workforce in the United States that we need to have to treat the number of people that need help. And I can't overstate that enough. I can talk about that here in West Virginia, but I know it's true everywhere. If you have drug addiction, you are going to have a hard time finding appropriate, useful treatment. And that's just really unfortunate.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Well, he's right, because 28-day treatment is not enough. And most insurance doesn't, well, I'll tell you, not most insurance. Insurance does not fund 28-day treatment. It doesn't pay for 28-day treatment at all. So most of the treatment is paid for from what's called grant dollars. So what grant dollars is, we may have 80 beds, but we only can fill 20 daily because it's only going to be paid for by grants, because big insurance that we pay for doesn't believe in funding 28-day treatment, nor do they believe in funding 6-month residential.
Cyril, there's so much more to talk about. I'm really glad we've got a post show. So Cyril and Dean and Jennifer and Dr. Carl, we're taking you online to stream.aldezero.com, and we will talk about addiction and opioids and the heroin epidemic in the United States online. Hopefully you can make it there too. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hello again. If you're watching now, you're watching the Streams Online Only post show. We've been talking about opioid addiction in the United States and heroin addiction as well. The two are related. Dean, what made you get better? How did you do that?
Boy, I did not think I was going to get better. I thought what everyone around me thought, and what people still think today is that heroin addiction is a death sentence. And I quickly found out, once I found peers who were in recovery from addiction, that that's absolutely not true. And I've since found out anybody can recover from addiction. It's about finding, like the doctor was talking about, finding the appropriate treatment and recovery options. So I found, I went into a state-funded treatment center. I called for 3 weeks, 3 times a day, and finally got in, and somehow was able to hang on for 3 weeks and keep calling and keep being willing to accept help.
Sure.
Yeah. And then, I found recovery. I found my people. I found the aliens. And, I really think that a lot of the reason why we're suddenly getting all this funding and all this attention is not just, because people are dying and because, it's just an awful car wreck that we're all admiring. I think it's the lobbying power of the people in recovery who are coming forward, like myself, like hundreds of thousands of others who are saying, hey, this isn't a death sentence, and you're talking about me and making decisions without me.
See, I keep seeing, Dean, at the corner of my eye, I can see Jennifer, and Jennifer is making me cry inside because, Jennifer, in this conversation, it's a bittersweet conversation because Cameron is no longer part of your family. He died from being an addict, but you took that terrible, terrible low and then turned it into a way to help other people. Let me show you here on my laptop what Jennifer's been doing here. This is the drug rehab center to open in Albuquerque. This is what Jennifer did. And then here, healing addiction in our community. So what do you know works? What do you know helps people get better, Jennifer, from your experience?
Well, in my experience, I sent my son to several different rehabs, and none of them seemed to. They were never long enough, and they never really provided, a stable foundation when he left there for him to continue that journey of recovery. And so we built a recovery center called Serenity Mesa Youth Recovery Center here in Albuquerque. And my original mission and my continued mission for Serenity Mesa is to provide individualized treatment that meets a person where they're at. So we don't provide cookie cutter treatment. We provide long-term living. So we're not a 28-day program. We don't have an end date. Someone can stay as long as they want. If they need to stay a year, they can stay a year. If they need to stay 60 days just to get back on their feet, that's what they do. And we work with them on an individualized plan that includes high school education, that includes college, that includes job skills, life skills. If someone doesn't know how to cook, we teach them how to cook. If they don't know how to pay their bills, we teach them how to pay their bills. It's really, the drug is just a piece of addiction. And, when you start to address holistically the entire person and their entire environment, then you can really get to the root of the problem and help a person integrate back into their communities, back to their neighborhood, back to their families. Just having them detox from the drug for 28 days is just the beginning. It's what happens after that that's important.
Yeah, because what you said, Dean, I identify myself as a person in long-term recovery. And so what that means is I haven't had a drink or a drug in 20 years, since August the 15th, 1995.
Let me write that down. August?
The 15th, 1995.
What do you remember about that day?
It's funny because I'll be coming here today. I was a little nervous, so I had to listen to the song that changed my life. And what changed my life for me was Eminem's Lose Yourself.
Okay.
And there was one piece of that song that applied for me. It says you only get one shot, one chance. And you're talking about I had been drinking and using for 34 years. Because I'm 54 years old, I'll be 55 out of 28th. I didn't get clean until I was 30. So all of these years that went by, and what was so significant about that day is that there was nothing really significant. It was just a day that I decided that I was going to stop.
Yeah, and that's key. That is key, is when they're ready. You can't really force somebody into treatment. You have to be ready, and that's the issue, I think, in the with most states, is we don't have treatment on demand.
Man.
So if someone's ready, they may have to wait 3 weeks for a bed. And so you're, to tell that person, well, just hang on and hopefully we'll have a bed for you in a couple weeks, just doesn't work. We need to have, and hopefully this money, from that Obama announced yesterday will allow us to have more treatment on demand, because, until we have that, we're just going to be running in circles and chasing our tails.
And because you mentioned that, I just want to show Dr. Carl, I want to show our audience, because Jennifer mentioned it, what that 1.1 billion would actually go towards. And you can see it on my screen here. Some of it is helping ensure that all Americans who want treatment can get the help that they need. So when we're talking about that help, I want to transition to this tweet we got, and we asked our community, should heroin use and opioid use be treated as a disease or a crime? And we got this answer from someone who says neither. They should be treated as psychosocial problems that arise from mental health vulnerabilities and environmental factors. So Carl, how do you go about treating someone's entire life and treating that person as a whole?
Well, that's the key piece. Actually, I have been convinced for a long time that opioid addiction is a primary brain disease, and the people that say that it's not, I think, miss that, because anybody who's addicted to opioids understands the incredible cravings that will lead you to do almost anything to get your drugs, and that comes about because of a disordered reward system in the brain. Now, having said that, the first thing, and the second bullet point you showed it up there, was to expand medication-assisted treatment. I think that's really key. If we're going to be able to deal with this problem, we have got to be able to get people stabilized in a good clinic on one of the buprenorphine products or maybe one of the methadone products, and then start to deal with these messy, complicated lives that they have. I mean, they have legal problems, emotional problems, and social problems, and financial problems, and it is difficult. I tell my residents all the time, working with the addict or the alcoholic is not for the faint of heart. I mean, it's easy to deal with somebody with diabetes, but you get somebody who has addiction.
It's true.
I mean, their needs are tremendous, and it's hard.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, because go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, because I was going to say.
Jennifer, you go first.
Yes, go ahead, Jennifer.
Cyril will go second.
Yes,
I've decided.
Jennifer.
Right? No, I was going to say, we run into that all the time at Serenity Mesa with, it's so much more than just the drug. It really is. It's a complete holistic picture of the individual. And my son was completely just a normal high school kid until he got addicted to heroin. And it literally, it ripped the rug out from under our family. It changed everything. And it changed him as a person. It changed everything about him. And it wasn't like he could just bounce back that quickly. It really was a complex situation that I knew nothing about. And I learn every single day from our residents here at Serenity Mesa more and more about what it takes to help somebody achieve long-term recovery. And it's so complicated. If there was a black and white solution, we would have it already and we wouldn't be dealing with this issue, but it's so complex and we just, there's just no easy answer, and it's really difficult.
Because I was going to ask Dean, and what you're doing up there in Somerworth, there's no one size fits all. There's no one treatment that works for everybody, which is why some people respond to methadone, some people respond to Suboxone, some people respond to Vivitrol, some people don't need anything. And it's just about, we have to find what works. And so and the best way that I found what works, because where I'm at now, we're becoming a Suboxone Induction Center, which is a total turnaround from what we were, which was a totally abstinence-based 12-step
And Suboxone, because I'm a fast learner, is it's used to treat addicts as they come off whatever they're taking.
Right.
So there's methadone and there's Suboxone. Doctor, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you like to use Suboxone.
Oh yeah, I've I was the first one in West Virginia to use it, and I initially was abstinence, completely abstinence-based for a long time. And since we started using Suboxone as part of a comprehensive treatment program, I've started to see miracles occur again. And it is a way of stabilizing the opioid addict's brain so that they're not half out of their mind craving every day and seeking drugs. When you get stabilized on Suboxone, if you use it correctly as part of a treatment program, and that's really key, these people will feel normal for a 24-hour period, and then they can go about the business of getting into recovery, doing all the things they need to do to attend to if they're going to get and stay clean. But as long as they're craving, it is really tough to treat these people. And so, I'm unashamedly now a big fan of the buprenorphine products, Suboxone being the one that's most well known. I think it's a wonderful treatment when used as a part of a good, solid treatment program.
So you guess
Go ahead,
Jennifer.
I was just going to share an example of one of our residents at Serenity Mesa. He's a long-term heroin addict. He's been an addict for probably 3 or 4 years, and he recently started a Suboxone program. And he had used Suboxone on the street, so he had abused it for a while. So he really thought of it as a street drug. So when he actually got into a program and was using it as you should, he told me, he said it was the first time that heroin wasn't the only thing on his mind from the time he woke up until the time he went to bed. He said for the first time ever, he was actually able to focus on other things other than heroin. And it had just consumed his brain. That was all he could focus on. And then once he got on Suboxone, now he's able to focus on other things. He's going to school, he's working on getting a job, and he's very successful.
And Dean, I know you're about to. Dean, I know you're about to say something as well. Go ahead, Dean.
And it's in New Hampshire specifically, we really don't have the infrastructure to handle this opioid epidemic, basically, and a lot of people are dying. So we've had to get a little creative, and a lot of us are starting to build up this peer support workforce. It's like the oldest form of therapy in the world, and one of the most effective ways to treat addiction is, or really any other chronic disease, is peer support. And so we have recovery community centers starting to pop up and funding for that. And, the one that does exist in New Hampshire is proving really successful. Sure. So, and, some people do not need, I don't want to diminish the efficacy of buprenorphine or methadone, to each his own, whatever you need. Sometimes it's just not that complicated. Right. Sometimes you just need to be with people who understand you and who won't judge you when you walk through the door, that you can confide in and trust and spend your time with. And, recovery does find a way.
Cyril and Dean and Jennifer and Dr. Carl, it's been a real pleasure having you in this conversation, a tough conversation, but it was really interesting hearing all of your perspectives and your experience. Malika?
I'll end with this comment from Brett Smith on Facebook, who says, until people start to understand that recovery is as important as treatment, we'll never win this war.
Yes, thank you so much. We decided when we were talking about this subject that it was so big, we probably would have to have a part 1 and a part 2. I feel that there may well be a part 2, but thank you for being part of part 1. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.